Hi everyone, I'm Michaela, the On-Farm Network Research Assistant. In this video, I'm going to go over the 2023 soybean fungicide trial results. First, I'd like to provide some background on different soybean diseases that are infecting our crops in Manitoba. Annually, NPSG agronomists, Manitoba agriculture agronomists, and Ag Canada staff survey soybean fields for diseases during reproductive growth stages in August. Common diseases we see in soybeans are bacterial blight, Septoria brown spot, downy mildew, frog eye leaf spot, white mold, fusarium, and Phytophthora root rots, and northern stem cankers. Of these diseases, it is these 6 fungal diseases that are controlled or suppressed by a foliar fungicide application. So let's take a look at some of these diseases in more detail. For bacterial blight and Septoria brown spot, both are leaf lesions. Bacterial blight lesions are brown and surrounded by a yellow halo and found in the mid to upper canopy since it sets in following leaf damage from winds or storm. Septoria brown spot is a fungal disease that moves from the soil upwards, so it's found in the lower canopy and they start as just little brown speckles with no yellow halo. Both of these lesions are usually small and unconcerning. You see them every year though, so I wanted to show them just so you're familiar with them. 2 other foliar diseases up close are downy mildew and frog eye leaf spot. With downy mildew, the upper surface of the leaf will be pale green, and if it's humid on the underside of the leaf, you might find a fuzzy gray mold-like growth. For frog eye leaf spot, we have these small irregular or circular spots on the leaf. It's tan in the center and the edges of the lesion are dark purple or reddish brown. For white mold symptoms in soybeans, during potting, you will find wilted plants. And when you open up the crop canopy to take a closer look, those stems will be bleached rather than healthy green in color. If it has been humid, there may be fluffy white mycelial growth. If it's dry, you might find small white bumps on the stem. In both cases, if you break open the stems, you'll often be able to find these hard black sclerotia bodies that are how white mold overwinters. So of those diseases, white mold has the greatest potential to negatively impact soybean yields. White mold has a very broad host range, infecting the majority of broadleaf crops. Soybeans, in comparison to other broadleaves, generally don't see severe infections of this disease very commonly in Manitoba. Their upright growth habit allows for a bit more airflow than in something like a dry bean or canola crop, and this airflow helps limit white mold spread. However, in those occasions where white mold is more prominent, it can be quite damaging. For every 10% increase in the amount of plants infected in a field, anywhere from 2 to 5 bushels per acre of yield are lost. Early infections are more damaging, and we're fortunate that it's not often that we're seeing high levels of this disease in Manitoba. Since the host range is so broad, it's worth knowing white mold's life cycle to inform scouting and management decisions on your farm. So starting with the snowflake on the bottom left, white mold overwinters as those sclerotia bodies in the soil and on crop residues. During the summer, warm, humid conditions encourage those sclerotia to germinate and release ascospores. These are blown on the wind to infect other flower petals, which are a sugar source for the disease to colonize. This is the part of the disease life cycle where fungicides can play a role. Fungicides covers those flowers' petals and the healthy green tissue, preventing infection. Once those petals drop, they are caught in stem nodes where infection spreads. Later in the summer, those sclerotia are formed on or in stems and drop to the soil with chaff during harvest. And then the cycle repeats. So with that introduction on soybean diseases, let's talk about on-farm trial results. The goal of these trials has been to assess the agronomic and economic impacts of a single fungicide application versus none in soybeans. Will a fungicide application reduce disease pressure, and will it protect yield and provide a return on investment in Manitoba? In 2023, we had 2 trials compare a single fungicide application versus none in soybeans. Product choice has been up to the farmer, and they are applied according to label recommendations. At both soybean fungicide 01 and soybean fungicide 02, Veltima was the fungicide of choice. At soybean fungicide 1, Veltima was applied at R1 stage on July 3rd and had a plant stand of 149,000 plants per acre on 20-inch rows. At soybean fungicide 02, Veltima was applied at R1 on July 6th and had a plant stand of 159,000 plants per acre on 10-inch rows. Previous crop can play a role in disease carryover with white mold. So here's the distribution of previous crops. At soybean fungicide 01, the previous crop was wheat, and at soybean fungicide 02, the previous crop was canola. July rainfall and the moisture around flowering can play a role in disease development. So here's the percent of normal July rainfall for each individual trial. At both trials, July rainfall was under the normal. It was very dry at soybean fungicide 2 at 18% of normal rainfall, and it was more wet at soybean fungicide 01, where they had 85% of normal. So in these trials, we rate the incidence or the percent of plants infected and severity of white mold, Septoria brown spot, frog eye leaf spot, and downy mildew. Bacterial blight and Phytophthora root rot are also noted, but they're not controlled by a fungicide application. At both trials in 2023, disease pressure was generally similar between soybeans that received fungicide application and those that did not. However, at soybean fungicide 02, 5% fewer plants were infected with northern stem canker when they received a fungicide application. So what does that mean for yield results in these trials? Well, at both trials in 2023, an application of fungicide did not produce any yield increase. This means that there was actually profit loss equivalent to the cost of product, which was about $20 an acre. So in summary, a single application of fungicide did not produce an increase in yield in 2023. However, when conditions are ideal for white mold to develop, soybeans can benefit from a fungicide application. To assess the risk of white mold developing in your soybean fields, there are some factors that we can consider. It starts off with the weather around flowering. Both the weeks leading up to it and conditions while flowering are open. Warm, humid conditions are preferred for white mold, with optimal temperatures pretty much being your average summer day and rainfall being the more key piece. If we're seeing 1 to 2 inches of rain within 1 to 2 weeks of flowering and persistent leaf wetness when walking through the crop, the risk is higher for white mold development. Thicker, denser canopies will also create a microclimate that is more humid and cooler and will also promote disease development. And the last big risk factor is crop history. If there are several host crops in rotation back to back, your risk will be higher. If you think of the last canola, bean, or pea crop in that field, what was disease pressure like then? If it was high, there's bound to be some carryover of sclerotia. In the last few dry years, the answer might just be low risk, but we had more moisture this year and more white mold, so keep records for future crops in those fields. If these risks all co-align, it's worth considering a foliar fungicide application to protect your yield. Other management strategies are, of course, crop rotation, rotating away to cereals or less susceptible broadleaf like flax. Wider rows and lower plant populations will improve airflow throughout the crop canopy, but ultimately that will also reduce overall yield potential. Foliar fungicides are a tool we can use, but for white mold, they are preventative, meaning we need to assess the risk ahead of spraying. So if you're interested in learning more about these results or about fungicide applications, every trial result is available on the On-Farm Network database, available at manitobapulse.ca or by following this QR code. If you're interested in participating in a trial, contact Chris, the On-Farm Network agronomist. Thanks for listening today. I've been Michaela, the On-Farm Network Research Assistant. You can find more information on our website or by following us on social media.